With the launch of iOS 17 and the fall of 2023, we're seeing 3 iPhones being left behind on iOS 16, where they'll get no new features and only occasional security updates for the foreseeable future. And the lowest tier of those phones is right here, the 2017 iPhone 8. It came out already 6 years ago now, alongside the iPhone 8 Plus and shortly prior to the iPhone 10, the other 2 iPhones being left behind in software support. Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and the iPhone 8 was an extremely popular iPhone for good reason. And today it still manages to remain a very usable, solid experience in the right situations. Namely, it needs to have a healthy battery, but in its ideal condition, it can still run pretty much any app and do most anything that even the most expensive iPhone 14 Pro can do. It just lacks the newer features and fancy design. But the iPhone 8 is still a workhorse, and the design is iconic to the point that Apple is still selling it with the 2022 iPhone SE 3rd generation. A phone I generally do not recommend buying, as it's not great value, but it does go to show how beloved and reliable this iPhone 8 hardware has been. So today we're taking yet another look at the iPhone 8. How does the iPhone 8 hold up 6 years later? Should you upgrade? And could it even be worth buying? Firstly, I did just do a video on the iPhone 8 Plus, which will be linked in the description. I chose to separate these 2 reviews for one major reason. The iPhone 8 has a direct successor with the current iPhone SE, whereas the 8 Plus is the final large home button iPhone with no obvious next step up for those looking to upgrade. If you have the iPhone 8 right now and really like it, but need a new phone for whatever reason, the iPhone SE 3rd gen is just the obvious answer, as it's basically the same phone with faster specs. It's pretty nice for iPhone 8 owners to have that direct upgrade path, and while I don't necessarily recommend the SE, as already said, if you want to keep things simple and straightforward and need that home button, well, it's a no-brainer, so go for it. And my review of it will be linked in the description as well if you want more info. But regarding the smaller iPhone 8, it hasn't aged quite as well as the 8 Plus due to a couple main factors. Battery life, and it does have less RAM, making it likely to be not quite as good as the 8 Plus is at keeping apps open in the background and just overall performance. The big one though in my experience does tend to be battery life, as the battery in the 8 was never very good to begin with, and it's just too small to really get you too far. It's the same main issue I have with the iPhone SE 2 and 3, and most iPhone 8s at this point have been used pretty well over the past half decade plus, resulting in battery degradation and possibly slowdown and inconsistent performance. You can check your battery health in settings under battery health, and that percentage is what remains of the original capacity. Once it's in the low 80s and under, that's when issues really tend to crop up. Though again, since this phone is pretty small, it's never really had great battery life to begin with. You can replace the battery through Apple, and they'll charge $50 for it, which sounds pretty reasonable until you look at eBay.com and realize that on its own, the iPhone 8 is only worth about $100 on the used market anyways. That said, if battery hasn't been an issue for you, this phone is still extremely capable. It runs smoothly with little slowdown from my experience, some choppiness here and there, but nothing major, and this does all vary device to device, and since these phones are quite old now, relatively speaking, other issues could hamper how it performs for you. For example, having nearly full storage could cause it to feel slow, and so clearing up space or even a full-on restore might be worth doing to restore some of its former glory. For storage, it originally came in 64 or 256 gigabytes, and then a 128 gig option would later replace the 256 altogether, something I forgot to mention in my 8 Plus review, but luckily YouTube commenters were happy to instantly correct me as kindly and understandingly as possible. Ultimately, iOS 16 is a solid version of iOS for the iPhone 8 to end its life on. It isn't slow, and that's huge for these older smartphones, as too many years of support can result in a very painful end experience, a la the iPhone 4S on iOS 9. And 6 years of support is nothing to scoff at. And so really, how does the iPhone 8 hold up? Pretty darn well, accounting for the issues that every other older smartphone deals with. And as of making this video, iOS 17 hasn't even come out yet, leaving the iPhone 8 technically still being fully supported. But even fast forwarding to later this year, not being on the latest iOS is no death sentence. You'll still be able to download most apps and do most anything, just like the $1,000 iPhones out there. But within 2 to 3 years, security updates will dry up and apps will no longer be supported on your current version. As well as this, no new iOS means no new features for the entirety of the iPhone 8's future, potentially leaving the experience feeling stale sooner rather than later. Is the iPhone 8 worth buying? I really don't think so, but it is really cheap on eBay, and so as a backup phone or a device for someone on an extreme budget, it might be an okay possibility. I'd really look at the 2nd gen iPhone SE though, which I will also link a review to in the description. It's barely more expensive and quite a bit faster, with probably an extra 2 years of software support support in the pipeline, along with the improvements that came with the A13 chipset and 3 gigs of RAM over the iPhone 8's A11 chip and 2 gigs of RAM. It's a similar phone, don't get me wrong, but the extra few bucks will get you a long way in terms of software support and overall performance, even if the battery life can still be pretty rough and the camera system is certainly lacking. But let's back up here and talk about the design of the iPhone 8 and how it compares to today, and then we'll take a look at the photography. The iPhone 8 was the first iPhone to bring a rear glass panel and aluminum frame, at least at the same time, keeping it lightweight while still having a very premium feel even in a modern context. The phone looks fantastic and not practically that different from the glossy glassed iPhones still being sold by Apple, although the curved over edges have become more boxy in the years since. Even so, the 3rd gen iPhone SE again does exist and looks exactly the same, except the Apple logo isn't centered, but from the front at least, good luck telling them apart. Actually, there is one way you can tell them apart, depending on the color, and we'll get to it shortly, but we've got the classic 4.7-inch Retina LCD panel with a resolution of 1334 by 750 and pixel density of 326 pixels per inch. It's a solid, color-accurate screen, and there's a reason it's been used for so long by Apple. Like the newer SEs, we have fairly thick bezels surrounding the screen with the haptic home button, hosting Touch ID or a fingerprint sensor, which is fast and reliable. Some people swear by these over Face ID, and in any case, it works great, and the haptics make the home button very, very satisfying to repeatedly click. The screen also has 3D Touch, which hasn't been in an iPhone since 2018. If you don't know what that is already, I'm not going to explain it because it doesn't matter. Apple's pretty much gotten rid of it in current software, but it is here all the same. As hinted at earlier, the bezels are actually one of the few ways you might be able to recognize the iPhone 8 as the 2017 device, as the front is colored white on the silver and gold renditions of the phone, whereas on the newer SEs there's not only no gold color at all, but the bezels on the silver model are also now black. The iPhone 8 actually had a few good colors here with the silver and gold, as well as space gray and my personal favorite, the product red, which looks fantastic with the black bezels. The glass back not only looks great, but it's there for wireless charging, and with that we also have fast charging if you've got the necessary accessories. We also have basic water resistance, so a quick dip in the sink or toilet isn't the end of the world. How nice it is that gone are the days of putting our phones in Tupperware containers full of rice, I must say. Overall, the design holds up well, if only for the fact that it's still being used in 2023 and beyond in the iPhone SE. But hey, even if it wasn't, I still really like this design. There's a reason Apple's used it for so long after the iPhone 6. It's functional, streamlined, attractive, and gets the job done. Hard to complain too much, although the phone does admittedly feel a little bit too small for me personally. I guess that's why they made an iPhone 8 Plus after all, and it is a lot smaller than that phone. The size of the body itself is pretty similar to an iPhone 10, 10s, or even 11 Pro. Those phones just got rid of the bezels and home button to increase the screen space vertically. It's a completely individual preference whether or not you find the phone too small, but I do still think a plus-sized iPhone SE would be majorly successful even in today's smartphone market. But enough of the design, let's move on to the photography. The iPhone 8 has aged fairly gracefully here for a number of reasons we'll get to, but the big thing holding it back versus better and newer smartphones is the only single 12 megapixel lens on the rear, compared to the dual setup on the 8 Plus and the iPhone 10 just for starters. It's optically stabilized though, and the main sensor there is the same one as on the iPhone 10 and 8 Plus, so while the 2x zoom telephoto lens would have been nice, it's definitely not necessary. That being said, you do have no portrait mode photos at all on the iPhone 8, whereas the 8 Plus or even the newer SE models are capable of taking them. And that's where things get interesting. The iPhone's main camera sensor is actually the same one as in the 2020 and 2022 iPhone SE. They just have better chipsets, and they produce better pictures thanks to the improvements made in computational photography. That being said, I do think that given this is the same hardware as in a $400 phone Apple is still currently selling, it's hard to dock the iPhone 8 points, and photos do end up looking pretty great in the right conditions. And I will briefly interrupt this to mention the selfie camera on the front. It's fine with just 7 megapixels and 1080p 30 video recording. Not fantastic, but good enough for FaceTime or whatever. But for what it's worth, the newer SEs actually haven't upgraded this. They also have 7 megapixel selfie cameras, and that is borderline ridiculous. So back to the main camera. The photos taken can differ wildly in overall quality depending on how much lighting you have available. The more the better, so outdoors and daytime can produce gorgeous results. And as said about the 8 Plus and iPhone 10 in their reviews, that's one thing I just love about this era of smartphones from around 2017. Yeah, smartphone cameras have gotten better, but we're not seeing nearly as huge of a leap as we used to see from say 2011 to 2017. The iPhone 8 could take good pictures in 2017, and so today it's still capable of taking good pictures. Where the iPhone 8 does start to show its age is in low light situations, and this is a place the SE 2 and 3 also really struggle, with no night modes to be found in any of them. Mind you, the newer phones are a bit better, not massively so, but a bit, and the iPhone 8 can be pretty mediocre with blurry, grainy images often occurring indoors outdoors or in any lower light situation. That said, it's still good enough in my eyes to capture the moment in memory just fine, and if you take a bunch of photos at once, you have a significantly better chance of at least one of those photos turning out good enough. For video, the iPhone 8 was one of the first phones to be capable of recording in 4K at 60 frames per second, which was very impressive at the time, and still honestly looks pretty great today, at least again in the right lighting conditions. This is only 30 FPS, but you get the idea. It's a solid camera overall, and while it might be lacking in some areas, it's hard to complain too much when the core hardware is still being used by Apple today. If you're using the iPhone 8 right now, as my own grandparents are, you can be confident that your phone is absolutely still capable of producing really nice images, at least without too much unnecessary scrutiny, and in an ideal situation. And honestly, I think that actually sums up the iPhone 8 pretty well as a whole. It's very capable of being a great phone and providing a smooth experience, with struggles only becoming obvious when you try to do too much with it, or the storage gets too full, or the battery health is bad, or you don't temper your expectations to account for this phone being a full 6 years old at this point, or at least just about. You can only expect so much out of it. And for what it is, I do really believe the iPhone 8 is a solid smartphone that's aged extremely well, helped massively by Apple reusing its design, absolutely, but even if they hadn't, I would argue the iPhone 8 still provides a solid experience that's more than good enough for a lot of people still using it nowadays. But battery life, man, that can be pretty brutal, and I think it's a good point to emphasize because it's the issue I tend to see the most from current users. Will it get you a day of life? Honestly, I don't know. It completely depends on the phone and the battery health and how much you actually use it. Low usage, yeah, it probably will get you a day, but even only moderate usage or video streaming, that sort of thing, you're probably going to want to keep a charger nearby in the very least. And with that, the iPhone 8 is still plenty capable of keeping you going for the foreseeable future, regardless of Apple leaving it in the dust on iOS 16. And so with that, I think that's pretty much all there is to say. So I turn to you guys. Any of you out there still using the iPhone 8? How's it working for you? Do you think the SE is the obvious next step, or are you going to go for something different? Curious to see your comments down below. Always so tough to review these devices as they lose support, but hopefully you found this video interesting, and if you did, make sure you hit that like button and consider subscribing for more content just like this. Thank you so much for watching. Apologies, I'm starting to lose my voice and I'm not sure why. It's been going on the last couple days, but in any case, I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and I will see you all next time.